Bismillah Rahman Rahim. All praise be to Allah, the cherisher and sustainer of the world, and blessings and peace be upon our Prophet Muhammad and upon his family and his companions. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining week 9 of our series, Understanding the Black American Experience and Unpacking Racism. This is Central Jersey Masajid Initiative, and so we thank all the masajids who have helped make this happen. Today, we have a very special guest, Ustada Ruqayya Yaqub, who will be addressing the topic from Rodney King to George Floyd. Ruqayya Yaqub is the founder of Light Legacy Books, a children's publishing house dedicated to telling stories of little-known heroes from across the globe. She is AMI certified Montessori elementary school teacher and studied Arabic and traditional Islamic sciences in the UK, Morocco, Spain, Mauritania, and the United States. She's a researcher, trainer, and author of the award-winning activity book, Ahmadou Bamba, Sage of Senegal. Her areas of interest include history, education, interest-free microloans, and sacred justice. We are so excited to have her and to learn from her. So without further ado, Ustaza Ruqayya, you have the floor.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you very much. MashaAllah. All right, so let's start. I actually do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to go, but you're not going to see it because there's no images to it. So I just apologize. So I'm going to just go ahead and start, inshallah. All right, Bismillah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli alayhi wa sallam. So one of the questions that was presented to me regarding this topic is, how can this keep happening? Why is it we've been hearing about these things for decades now? And the reality is, it's actually been a lot longer than that. But let's go with the main narrative that we hear. Why do we keep hearing about it? From Rodney King all the way to just recently. Why do we keep hearing? How does it happen in 2020? How does this keep happening? So there's some points that I've isolated that I was going to discuss with you. There were 5 main points. One of them is the myths that are held in this society about Black people. So there's certain ideas that we have as a society, and those ideas can be part of your way of thinking, regardless of your color. There are people who are Black who think this way. There are people who are from, different Asian backgrounds, white people, obviously, and a variety. It's not really limited to a particular ethnic group or a particular race. This is something that when you grow up in a society, it's as if it's in the air. It's like it's something that you kind of take on, unless you're actively working, what one would call anti-racist. You're actively saying to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to take on these certain ideas about people. I'm going to, come with a clean slate when I'm dealing with people. Anyway, so the first one is a myth that I held in this society of black people. The idea of Black people being violent or being criminal or being criminals or being pain resistant. And there's something that comes up in a lot of issues when it comes to Black people. So if you're a police officer, for example, has his weight on a Black person, part of them thinking is, I'm not really hurting this person. And they're very comfortable to carry on doing it because of that idea in society. Another of these myths is the idea of Black people being lazy, immoral, intellectually inferior. And these are things that, it just permeates our society, sadly. Another one of these is the ideas we have about crime itself. There's certain things that are just not categorized as crimes, or things you wouldn't call the police about. For example, wage theft. I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but it happens all the time, where people's wages are illegally taken, either through not paying overtime or through doing some, certain manipulation of the way the person is categorized, what kind of employee they're categorized as, not given, take their tips being taken away from them. These are things that it impacts a huge amount of people. A wide variety of people get impacted by this. It's something that the theft is something that I was reading a paper about this recently, where you've got millions and millions of dollars that are actually being taken from employees in this way, and it's something that isn't categorized as a crime in the same way that shoplifting is. And the person that's shoplifting might just be taking some bread or a drink, or it could be any of these things, and they would be actually the police will be called on them. Whereas you have these other crimes that are done that are just overlooked, and that's because in the society we see one as a crime and another as not. You only actually have 5 states in the whole of the United States of America where there's some kind of protection from there's actually some kind of protection, wage theft protection according to the law. Can you just imagine that? Anyway, the third one I want to talk about is society's acceptance of the murder of people who are presumed guilty. In our society, we talk about, the importance of justice and due process, but the reality is we do accept this. We do accept that if a person is seen as or presumed to be guilty, that we've accepted that these people can be murdered. The fourth one is the value of property over life. So in the society that we live in, generally, property is valued over life. And this is along racial lines and class lines. And then we've also got, which is really the first point I should have made, is the creation of whiteness and blackness. Because of these entities that were created in this society, and you know this because when you move to different parts of the world, you experience things. And this doesn't mean racism doesn't exist in other parts of the world. When I talk about creation of whiteness, it's the erasure of white groups. For example, once upon a time, your white person was either, Irish or Italian or Serbian or Bulgarian or whatever it is that they were from, or English. That's what they were. And a lot of people still see themselves culturally attached to them. In society, all these groups have now been categorized as one group, which is white. And then also when you come to black people are from different parts of the world. They have different ethnicity, different cultures, but these have all been categorized into one group. And one group has been given one value in society and the other group a different value. So that's the main reason why these things keep happening, is because of these issues. And the other question that I was asked to address is why does political party not matter? Why is it that this happens in states where the governor is a Republican, happens in states where the governor is a Democrat, it happens in states where the mayor is a Republican, it happens in states where the mayor is Democrat? Why does this keep happening? And the reason is, well, one of the reasons that I've come up with, the research can still be done, and there probably are other reasons, is that Democrats and Republicans and any other group of people in this country are still Americans. And America itself was established on a number of myths, like we just mentioned before. One of them is the creation of whiteness to undermine class solidarity. So if you do the research, you'll realize that there was a certain point in time that people ceased being whatever the ethnic groups were and became white. And this was done in order to break up the solidarity that was building between blacks and whites who were being oppressed. This has been the earlier days, of establishment of America in the 1600s. This is during the times of the colonial times. And then we've got the dehumanization of Africans to justify America's slave economy. So the thing about enslavement and the whole history of it is, it was something that really fueled America's economy. And even though it was primarily the southern economy, but the northern economy benefited from it too. So even though you had the plantations in the South, the products that were being harvested and grown in the South was being imported up into the North, was being taken to the North to be processed in order to sell. So both parts of the country were benefiting economically from this travesty. And because there was so much economically invested in this, there had to be there was a need to rationalize this enslavement. And the way it was done was that, well, Black people, Africans were not human. Therefore, whatever we do to them is not like doing it to somebody who looks like us. When I say us, I mean white people now, because obviously I'm not a white person. But this dehumanization is what made people feel that it was okay to carry on with what they were doing. It's okay to keep the economy running. It was okay to keep on destroying, centers around in Africa as well as the horrific treatment of people who are being taken from their homes, from their families, from everything they have ever known, and everything being stripped away from them and being brought into this land and being dehumanized. And that dehumanization is something that became that excuse became something that became part of the American psyche. So if you're in this country, whether you decide, okay, I'm a Democrat and I care about XYZ, or I'm a Republican and I care about XYZ or ABC, these are still underlying principles that most people are subscribed to. And part of that is it's almost as if it's a subconscious. It's almost at the subconscious level that unless a person's really actively thinking about what's going on in this country or why it's going on, they're not even aware of it. And the last one being the last of the three myths that America was established on is white supremacy. The idea of the white race being a superior race, even though the word race is something that can be contested. And obviously the whole idea isn't factual at all. But even though things might not be real, they can have real impact on people. So the idea of white supremacy has impacted people from the time that it was formulated all the way to the present day. So that's the thing. So when you have these things in place, no matter what the political ideas might be that surround the parties are made up of human beings. And if those human beings are not dealing with these issues, it's still going to remain. And that doesn't mean that there might not be policies that a particular party has that can benefit people. Obviously it can be, but when it comes deep down to it, it's the individuals that make up society that who hold these beliefs that enables these things to carry on. Police brutality and other manifestations of anti-blackness and the disregard of the powerless is an issue of the heart. This is an issue of the heart. When we talk about the heart and diseases of the heart, things like arrogance, envy, sorry, my screen keeps going out. And all of these other issues that cause a person to really feel that they are superior and another group is inferior, these are diseases of the heart. And these are things that in order to deal with them, one has to actually recognize that they exist. And a great example of this, well, honestly, the word great is a good word to use. We think of the story of Amy Cooper. And this person who's probably on paper a great person, probably has, Black friends, Latinx friends, and is probably somebody who, serves a local soup kitchen every now and then. Your average nice white lady who's, in the park breaking the rules. She hasn't got her dog on the leash, right? And a Black man says to her, please put your dog on the leash. And she's incensed. How dare this man tell me what to do? How dare he correct me? How dare he say a single thing to me? Does he not know his place in society? Does he not know who I am? I am a white woman and you are a Black man. And it's actually something she emphasized when she calls the police. She's like, oh, there's an African American male. And why does she say this? Because she knows that that's going to trigger a certain reaction in whoever's taking that call, and something's going to be done about it. The good thing in this situation is the police will not come and see him there and attack him or murder him or any of those things. By the time they arrive, they've both left. And it seems like this is a case that is being taken seriously. And a lot of people are actually taking a deep look, they're actually seeing themselves. And some people aren't seeing themselves, they're still seeing that, oh, it's that person over there. It's that person over there, not recognizing that these issues are deep within anyone who breathes the air in this country and other parts of the world. But I'm going to focus here because that's what we're talking about right now. So white America, all who subscribe to white supremacy, have to recognize the need to change what is in their heart. Because if we can't start by recognizing that, nothing's going to change. We might change on paper. For example, there's all sorts of great things on paper when it comes to how people are treated in society. But when you look at it and you see how people are actually being treated, it isn't that good. It isn't that good. It isn't good at all. And one of the reasons is that we aren't digging deep enough in order to make a change. We're not recognizing that that person is each of us. It's not just Karen over there or Becky over there or Amy Cooper. It's each individual and the myths that we hold, the ideas we hold about other people. The idea is that we think it's okay for a certain group of people to be, imprisoned for an offense that you wouldn't imprison another person who looks differently, and take the example of this woman, a woman who's homeless. She has a child. She wants a good education for her child. She puts a false address for the child because she doesn't live there. Why does she live there? Because she's homeless, and she gets 5 years for this. Whereas you have people, for example, the star, I think it's all the family, some TV star, who's cheating, having her child, paying for her child's SAT scores to be to be to be to be to be improved, or praying for her the SATs, so she can get into a good college, and she gets a couple of weeks. So the idea there is that this, quote unquote, refined white, person can't do any time in jail, but we're going to give her 2 weeks. But this other person, and the reality is that we are judging people. We're judging people, and that's the reason why certain laws are in place for some and not in the others, and certain laws are being are being implemented. So you have, like, for example, someone might say, well, we talk about the myths about Black people and the issue about being criminals. And someone said this to me online. They said, well, if you look at the statistics, Black people commit more crimes. And then my response to this person is, how are neighborhoods being policed? Because if you're policing a Black neighborhood, much more than you're policing white neighborhoods, you're going to catch certain things. For example, if you're on the campuses of college campuses of colleges that are predominantly white, you are going to find drugs. You are going to find drugs. And if you've been doing that from the 80s up until now, you're going to find them. And how many of those people could have been thrown in jail for that? But you're not. You're policing the area where a lot of Black children are, and Black youth are. And you're stopping and frisking, stop and search. You're doing all these. You're having all these policies. So if you're policing an area to a higher degree, you're gonna find more crime. Whereas if you're not checking, and the same thing happens in the classroom, because I'm talking a lot about the police, but as a teacher, I've read papers on this where they did tracking. They did tracking of teachers, their eye movements in the classroom. And this is as young as kindergarten. And they noticed that the teacher was looking more at the African American children than any other group. And if you look more at the group, who are you going to catch misbehaving? You're going to catch the person you're looking at. And you're not going to catch the child you're not looking at. If you're not looking at a certain group of kids, they're going to do all sorts of things and not get caught. And those African American children are going to say to themselves, well, I'm doing exactly the same thing as that little boy over there or that little girl over there. Why am I being sent to the principal's office? Or why are the police being called on me? Or I'm being sent home with in school out of school suspension, or whatever it is, but nothing's happening to this child. So there's all of these things that happen because of the thoughts we have and the way we see other people, and this all stems from the heart. And it's difficult because we live in a society that doesn't see the heart as anything more than a muscle that pumps blood around, and keeps us alive, basically. But we don't see the spiritual role and spiritual dimension of the heart and what it holds. So let's get to let me go to the next slide I have. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is systemic racism. And systemic racism, and I'm sure if all of you watched the video that was assigned with this course, you saw it, and it was a great illustration of how people are impacted by the ideas people have about them. And these are things that you can't even do anything about. For example, someone can come up to you and say an unkind word. You can tell them, hey, that's wrong. Don't speak to me like that, X, Y, Z. Those kind of personal infractions are things you can deal with. Or you can just ignore them and just say, oh, this is just an ignorant person, and you keep moving. But systemic racism, these aren't things that as individuals we can fix. As individuals, we can work as a society to fix if we recognize them. But the problem, we live in a society that doesn't recognize them. Part of it is because they're not impacted by them. So these are things that affect us every single day. And when I say us, I mean the whole of society every single day. But they impact us differently. So for a person who's been impacted negatively by systemic racism, your quality of life is being reduced and it's actually being affected. You might even end up, not only are you going to have a lower quality of life, you might actually end up with a life that has been, taken because of the ideas people have about you. Whereas if you're on the other side, you are impacting your soul and your heart by doing those things, by judging people, by hurting people in these ways. So I have a whole list here. We talk about the healthcare system. These systemic racism impacts the healthcare system. When you go to a doctor, you're treated a certain way based on your race and based on your class. And there's studies that show this. So it isn't just, black people saying, oh, I feel this way, I feel that way. And yes, we do. But there are actually studies that show that this is happening. And it's interesting because in a lot of these studies, they say things like, well, we don't understand why it's happening, but we see that race plays a factor. And until people are willing to look deeply within themselves and recognize that it isn't just playing a factor, but it's people making race play a factor, because race doesn't have to play a factor. It's the doctors, it's the nurses, it's the whoever, the healthcare givers that let this play a factor in the giving of health, in providing healthcare. And not to say that obviously there are so many people who are doing their job in an amazing way, but still you have implicit bias. You have the concept of implicit bias, where a person might not even be aware that they feel a certain way, and this feeling impacts the way they interact with the patient that they're dealing with. And this is the reason why, like in many schools, when you're studying public health, you learn about implicit bias. When you're going into nursing school, you learn about that. Medical school, you learn about that. But it has to be more than just, oh, this can happen to this person, that person, but this can be anyone, and this can be you. And there has to be the separation as well, because sometimes people feel like, okay, if I have some kind of bias, if I act in a way that is wrong, or you talk the issue of racism, people start to feel very personal about it. When I say people, I mean the people who are the actors in this situation, the ones who are the ones who are treating another group negatively because of their race. And what I would suggest for people who have a knee-jerk reaction to this term of race or racism is, don't take it personally. Just try to fix whatever the problems that you have, or the biases you have, based on the society you were born into, because you didn't have any choice about the society you were born into. You don't have any choice about the history of this society and what it's made, what's part of the landscape of the society, without even trying. But you can make a change with yourself. You can't change the last 300-400 years of this country. You can't change the things that happened, but you can recognize that I'm part of this system, and I'm actually upholding this system. Let me play my little role in dismantling. And if each person who is benefiting from the systemic racism plays a role in dismantling it, it will happen. But each person has to recognize that it's them, and not just look at, oh, it must be that Trump supporter over there. It must be that lady over there. But you have to see it in your own self and recognize that you can still be a good person and have faults. And the important thing is you just work on those faults. You work on them, you recognize them, and you work on yourself so you can be an even better person. All right. We talked about the impacts of systemic racism, impacts the healthcare system, infant mortality, the education system, the school to prison pipeline. When you have children as young as 6 or 7, having the police called up on them, or you have in schools, you don't have counselors, but you have police officers who deal with misbehavior, instead of a counselor talking to the children, or instead of a meditation room or a calm down room, or instead of the teachers being trained on how to deal with behavior, you've got a police officer, and the police officer isn't trained in child development. Why are they in the schools? And that really comes to the issue of the defunding the police, which we'll get to later on. The political climate is impacted by systemic racism. The kind of people that make their way to the halls of power, the laws that we have, the people who are the laws that get through, who get the bills that get passed, is impacted by systemic racism. The criminal justice system as a whole, even the poverty around us, businesses and the ability to have a business. And we know that for generations, and still to this day, but even more in the past, for generations, people will be refused a business loan or a mortgage simply based on the color of their skin, not based on their ability to pay back the loan or on how much they earn, but just based on the ideas that come to mind of the person who can give the loan, the ideas they have of a black person seeing a black person. And I know, and I just want to make this disclaimer, I know that when it comes to racism, there are other groups that are impacted by it. But because this particular course is focusing on anti-blackness and black systemic racism as it impacts black, I'm talking about that group in particular. But I know it's a much wider problem within their society, and there's also the wider problem of class and intersection between class and race, and that's a whole talk for another lecture. But I just want to make you aware that these are issues that are of importance too, and I'm aware of them. But I just want to stay focused on the issue of blackness and anti-blackness for this particular session. So we talked about housing, and I saw you watch the video clip that talks about redlining and how, because one of the things about this society is getting a loan depends on what kind of collateral you have. So if you have a house, it's a lot easier, to liquidate part of that money and be able to make it available for paying for school or whatever else you want to do. But when you don't, when you're paying rent, you're not able to do that. So sometimes a person might say, well, this happened a few generations ago. Why is it still a problem today? My parents came from, Nigeria or Egypt or Pakistan or whatever with $20, and now they're a doctor somewhere and they're really successful. Why can't everyone else do it? One of the things you have to understand is that you don't have that intergenerational systemic racism that the African American community is dealing with. And all of these things that I just mentioned, even though you might be hit in some places, for the most part, a person isn't impacted by all the different systems that I mentioned just because their parents came from somewhere else. And also, in this society, there is, how do I put this? There is the intergenerational the impact is also intertwined with the trauma that one experiences when you are when these are things that you've had to live through. These are things that generations before you had to live through. So it's more than just one thing or the other. There's the number of different factors here that are impacting a person's present day and on what they're able to do. Now, the other point that was raised, I was asked to talk about is Black leadership. We talk about Martin Luther King and just to understand Black leadership. But one thing that I want to remind you all is that during his day, Martin Luther King was despised, even though people like to talk about him a lot now, and Black History Month becomes the whole month is about Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream, not about his whole mission and how he really saw the problem in America, but just one tiny aspect of his legacy. Even though that's how it is today in 2020, during his time he was despised. He was despised by the media, by the government, and he even had problems within the Black Christian leadership, because he was trying to fight for workers' rights and he was trying to bring in the idea of the economics, because that's part of it too. And they were like, look, we've already made we've made some and we've improved our lot by quite a bit. Let's not rock the boat by bringing in other groups and bringing in the economic issues and workers' rights. Let's not do that. This is the kind of advice he was getting by people who were around him. He was like, no, I've got to stand up for what I understand, what I know is the truth, what I know is my mission. And this is how he was assassinated. So, and he was under constant surveillance. And this is something that all Black movements were under. They were under government surveillance. And when you're under government surveillance, one of the things that happens there is that it isn't just you're being you're being watched and notes are being taken, but you're having people into your groups in order to infiltrate, either to come back with information or to just act as an agent provocateur in order to encourage these groups to do things that they can be imprisoned for. And I'm not going to go into that because there's so much information online that you can read about and you can learn about. There's actually a documentary that was made where a group of white activists uncovered the COINTELPRO, which is the counterintelligence surveillance program that was what was surveilling. This is the actual program that all Black movements during the civil rights era were impacted by. Their leaders and their members, all of these groups, they basically had a dossier, and these group of white activists went in, got the paperwork and gave it to newspapers, and it was put out like that. It was put out, and I think recently a documentary was made about this. It might have been in the last like 10-20 years, just to show this is happening. And when you have these sort of things happening, it's hard to build leadership, because once you start to build leadership, it starts to be broken down. But one of the things that I am seeing, because the question was, okay, what is leadership now? Who has the mantle? Is you've got individuals who are leading in different arenas. So you don't have like one overall leader. And maybe this isn't the time for things like that. It's pretty better to have different leaders who are, in different groups. Those leaders are, some are maybe calling to dealing with economic issues, some with political issues, some with police brutality, some with farming, agriculture, and the idea of people being able to sustain themselves. So you've got a different type of leadership now, and it's something that you've got different pockets of people who are doing things in different areas that need direction in. That's what I would say regarding that particular part of the question. Now, what I want to do is, I know there's a lot of material that people have been reading and have been having to look at in this time. So I want to be able to answer questions, but I do want to talk briefly about defunding the police. And there's a really wonderful post that I saw about this. I want to actually pull it up. Just give me a second. Okay, yes. All right, so here, and this is by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and this is her response to what does an America with defunded police look like to you? And it's interesting because many of you already know what it looks like. The good news is that it actually doesn't take a ton of imagination. It looks like a suburb. Affluent white communities already live in a world where they choose to fund youth, health, housing, etc., etc., more than they fund the police. Money's being put into youth. So there's programming for the youth. There is good health care. There's housing there. All of these things are available. These communities have lower crime rates, not because they have more police, but because they have more resources to support healthy society in a way that reduces crime. And also, they're not policed as much. This is what the statistics show. So the money that's being, instead of putting lots of money into the police in these areas, it's being put into the people. It's being invested into the young people, so they have things to do. They feel valued and they feel loved. When a teenager, sorry, I'm adding some commentary here. This is not just her words. When a teenager or preteen does something harmful in the suburb, the white communities bend over backwards to find alternatives to incarceration for their loved ones to protect their future, like community service or rehab or restorative measures. Why don't we treat Black and brown people the same way? These are her words. Why doesn't the criminal justice system care about Black teens' future the same way it cares about white teens' futures? Why doesn't the news use Black people's graduation or family photos and stories the way they do when they cover white people, e.g. Brock Turner? who commit hateful, harmful crimes. Affluent white suburbs also design their own lives so that they walk through the world without having much interruption or interaction with police at all, aside from community events and speeding tickets. And many of these communities try to reduce those too. Just starting there would be a dramatical and radically different world than what we're experiencing now. Now, I'm going to give an example. I went to Rice University, amazing university in Houston, to visit with my daughter because we were thinking about just for her to get a look at this university. And when I went there, I thought to myself, wow, if the black communities were like Rice, everything would be so different. Even if the schools in black communities were like Rice University, the high schools or the middle schools, because everything was done to make each student feel that they were really important, they were valued, and your focus is to study. And for example, they had a police. They have their own on-campus police. So if for some reason you feel threatened, they have like these buttons through the campus that you just press, and a police officer drives over, comes to you to see if you're okay, and if you need to get a ride to your dorm room, we'll take you to your dorm room. And there's like a health like a YMCA. You got your whole floor of the library, I believe, is the bottom floor. It's like a place where you can work out. You've got like about 3 or 4 floors for the library. I mean, the whole area was just beautiful, and it felt like a community. And this is something that existed in many, and still exists actually, in many black communities. But then you talked about the idea of a redlining, right? But also another thing that happened is many black neighborhoods that were affluent neighborhoods or middle class neighborhoods, or just neighborhoods where people were just living their peaceful lives. These areas sometimes were taken over. When I say taken over, it's like, okay, we're trying to build the interstate. We're going to build it this way across this neighborhood, and then people have to move from these areas so that this highway could be built. And I think to myself, I'm sure these highways could be built anywhere. Well, not so much anywhere, but there could have been other neighborhoods that could have been bulldozed through. So it's this idea of really doing things that cater to one group that makes that group feel valued. And the thing is that I don't want for one group to be valued and one not. I actually want for all the groups to be valued. So it's not a case of like I feel like there should be a desire for every group to be valued, especially the groups that are undervalued today. So I'm going to go ahead and take questions if there are any questions. And I'm stop talking now, take any questions if there are any.
Oh, sorry. Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much. I really liked, I actually was taking notes, but I really liked, you said this portion that really stuck out to me, and it was, you can't change 300 or 400 years of a country, but you can change yourself. And I think that really resonated with me because it's something we can all do, right? Looking inward and looking how we are part of this problem. So thank you for sharing that. At this point, like Ustaza Ruqayyat said, you can submit questions. You could do it through Facebook comments or as a YouTube comment. So we'll just wait and we'll definitely address them. There is a question we do have actually, and it's pretty much, how do you think masjids should deal with the police, especially since many times a lot of our masajids rely on the police, whether it be for during a terror attack, whether it be for Ramadan, whether it be for a community's children getting in trouble. Unfortunately, we do sometimes rely heavily on the police. And when talking about defunding the police, how can our masajids go about that?
You mean not relying so much on them, or do you mean? Well,
I think both, because I think it's a loaded question. But first of all, like, how can we shift our attention so we can, find other ways to help our community?
Well, I understand, but I don't think there's a problem with, for example, if you've got the police, it's Ramadan, it's a busy time, you might need help with that. I can understand doing things like that. But I think that one of the things I think will be really good for the Muslim community, especially the matches that are led by the Unpacking and the Arab community and other like non-Black communities, is really trying to make have a relationship of accountability. So it isn't just, oh wow, you treat us well, we pay you, and everything's okay. But just having that relationship where you are really saying, and it doesn't have to be blaming, but really saying to the police, like, okay, what's being done about this? We're concerned. In our faith, it teaches us that when you take a life, it's as if you've killed the whole of humanity. And we keep hearing these stories. What is being done? What support can we give you to make a change? And even suggesting things, even saying, okay, we know we hear about this defunding the police debate, and it's a very loaded question, but can we have some kind of town hall where we sit down and really discuss it so you can understand what we're really saying, what's really being said, and not these sound bites of, oh, there's going to be no police officers and everything's going to be total chaos in the world or in America, but really understanding that we just want for the Black community, for the youth, just like how our youth, when they walk past you, they feel safe. When I say our youth, I mean, like, because I know Black persons are just like me, but I'm saying, I mean, when you're, average Pakistani Muslim or white Muslim or whatever group it is walks past a police officer, they're not thinking to themselves, oh, there's a police officer. Whereas, when I see a police car, I'm doing salawat. That's what I'm doing. I'm making dua. I'm like, because I just don't know, and then the person might even just be driving past me. But just because of the situation of how so randomly, it's like, it's interesting. It's not interesting. It's I think what makes it very difficult is that there's no rubric for really dealing with the police as a Black person. You might do everything you can do, dress a certain way, speak a certain way, keep your hands in a certain place. There's no guarantee, and we know in life there isn't a guarantee. Allah is, we have our, we know that, but but it's hard to interact with a group of people when what you hear about them the most is the murder of people who look like you, and for many of these, there's no reason. The reality is, even if there's a reason, there's no justification for murdering someone. Even if that person just murdered someone, there's due process, right? You arrest the person just like you do with white assailants. Like, you've got, that young man, Dylan Roof, goes into a Black church, kills 9 people. The police weren't shooting him up. They were doing everything they can in their power, with the negotiators, whatever, to take him and have him face, whatever the process is for his crime. And that needs to be done with Black people. The assumption shouldn't just be made that, oh, it doesn't matter, we can just shoot at them or we can just kill them. And that seems to be the case. Maybe the police officers aren't saying this, or maybe not saying this publicly, but the way things are turning, the way the news is presented, and the way these numbers look. And the thing is, I know, because the people who say, oh, the white people being killed, yeah, I care about that too. I don't think anyone should be murdered by the police, but the reality is, the numbers, especially when you do it in proportion of the number of people in the country, it's much higher for Black people, and it's higher for Native Americans too, and for Hispanic Americans.
Yeah.
Any amount is high. Any amount more than 1 is high, and more than 0 is high.
That's
People
true.
shouldn't feel like when they're dealing with the police that they could die.
That's true.
And I think if the wider Muslim community, when they're dealing with the police or dealing with the politicians that they deal with, if they can just bring these things to the forefront and say, we care about these things as Muslims, and we want to know what you're doing about it, and have to make there's some kind of accountability. It can't just be, we're just going to drink chai and bring out some baklava and then just smile and take photos and it be in the paper, and that's why some of us feel like, are we really on the same page? Is this the same deal that we're signing up for? And I understand that sometimes we need the police, and especially if there's some transition going on between where we are now to get into a place where it isn't so militarized, and it isn't, all our funds isn't going into that. I mean, as I used to be a teacher, teachers are having to do GoFundMes to get, materials in their classrooms.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
We have no problem defunding all sorts of important things, and you talk about our areas, because schools, the funding for schools is based on the taxes that are paid, property taxes. We already have a built-in system where, because most Black people are going to be in poorer areas because of redlining, because of the history of this country, even a person who's trying to make their way out and has worked really hard, you're still you're 400 years behind, when it comes to the starting point. You're not starting from the same point, and then you've got different obstacles on the way. So I just feel like, if the Muslim community, the wider Muslim community, can be aware of these things and really come to the when they're interested in the police, have the good relationship. That's fine, that's great, but also try to seek that for other groups. So it's not just about it being for the Indo-Pak Muslim community or the Arab Muslim community and the white community, but let that be for all Americans. That's something we should all be working towards.
Thank you. We do have another question, and it's saying, despite what you have mentioned, this country has produced a Black president, Black Supreme Court judges, Black senators and Black representatives, Black professionals, Black educators, Black artists, and Black athletes. Doesn't this mean that they do have economic opportunity and access to justice? How would you respond to that?
It's possible. Like, for example, let's look at the story. Let's go back to Amy Cooper and the man that, got his last name Cooper. I forgot his first name, sorry. And the man that she was enraged by. Okay. Now, initially there was some kind of like talk, like, okay, well, maybe he was a threat, maybe this, maybe that. Then when the people heard that he's a Harvard graduate, it's like, oh no, how could she treat this Harvard graduate like this? It's like, oh, he was a Black man first, right? So the problem here is like, for a Black person to achieve in the society, you have to be exceptional. You have to be, and the reality is a person shouldn't have to be exceptional to be able to be safe in society. So I'm not saying there are opportunities. There are opportunities. I mean, there are people who are able to do all sorts of amazing things in this country. But when we talk about the wider society, there aren't opportunities for all. And you have to have a lot of lucky breaks really to get to where you are, to get to where those people the examples were being given. And what I really want to see, I'm not saying that there's no good in this country, there's no opportunity, there is, but I like to see a widening of opportunity, and also a widening of the way when we're interacting with Black people, being able to see that the humanity of Black people. So there's this idea that, okay, a person doesn't have to be an amazing individual to be treated as a human being. We should just treat people as human beings and give them the same opportunities. And just like we want for maybe a white youth who's made a mistake, they're like, okay, no, we'll just give them community service. I don't want them to go to jail. I don't want that either. But let's give the Black kids that same opportunity too. Let's have the opportunity for them, so that, because what happens is once you go to jail, a number of things can happen to you. One is you can be so disillusioned because of the treatment there that can impact your life. You have the story of Caliph Browder, who was put in jail. He was accused of stealing a backpack. And because he wouldn't take a plea deal, and that's one of the main reasons why you get Black people in jail, because they take plea deals, because they're told that this is the quicker way to get out, because they know the system's stacked against them. And he wouldn't take a plea deal because, like, I didn't do anything wrong. This boy I think he was 15 at the time. I have two children who are older than that, so I can't even imagine my child being in that situation. And the child's been taught that if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to admit to something you haven't done wrong. He spends 3 years in jail, hardcore jail, not just like a nice little getaway, but being beat up, all sorts of things happening to him. When he finally gets out, he commits suicide. All for a backpack. And this is the idea of property being more important than life. So I'm saying, I know there are opportunities, and I know that every police officer isn't, corrupt and, ready to, shoot and kill and everything. But there's too many. There are too many as it is right now, and there are problems in the way society is. There isn't a proper sense of safety. Your average Black person doesn't have the same sense of safety that other groups can feel in their society. And it's interesting, I was reading an article about Black expats. You got Black Americans who move to the UK or Europe and work there. One of the things that they're all saying, if you think about it, these are people who are the top of their jobs here in America. And if you think about Black CEOs, you don't have many of them. So these are people who are highly educated, had lots of opportunities, were able to, get a really good job through a transfer of their American branch to a European branch. One of the things that almost everyone said is that they felt that they could actually exhale when they left America. And there's racism everywhere you go. I'm not saying there isn't racism there, but the kind of racism that was there is different because of the different history of these countries. And one of the things one of them said is that I think they were they were going somewhere and they saw some police coming on. Immediately, the person started to tense because in America, you see a police officer as a black male, you got to be ready because anything could happen. All the police officer said to me is good evening and just kept walking. And he was just like, but he didn't realize how different his experience was till that happened. So I'm saying that even just that psychologically, it takes up a lot of your creative space if you have to think, you have to worry, you have to wonder all the time what's going to happen to me, you know, and that's really what I'm talking about. And alhamdulillah, there are opportunities, and alhamdulillah, people work very hard and get them, and sometimes they just get them without working very hard. It just happens because they just got raw talent, you know. But I want to see a society where every child can have an opportunity to be whatever they want to be without having to, you know, be amazing at basketball or amazing at football and therefore respected and being able to get the chance to get to the NBA or whatever it is. I would like for just to be a common thing for every child just to feel, and just when it's the police officer to feel like, hey, this is someone who cares about me. Like when I was raised, as a police officer, somebody who helps you. So if you get lost, you find a police officer, you ask for directions. You know, sadly, I don't think I can teach that to my children. I want to be able to teach that to my kids, you know, but I want to be real with them as well. So, yeah.
Wow. So there's another question, and it's, do you feel as though Muslims that are not Black are dismissive of Black Muslims or Black people in general from your experience? As a Pakistani American, I see and feel how previous generations held the same assumptions and stereotypes as most white Americans.
Well, generally, I would say yes, but I would say that you find individuals who are aware, because this is the thing. I think many people are not aware. I don't think most people are going around like, okay, I just want to treat people a certain way. I think a lot of people just aren't aware and they're just busy living their lives, you know, earning their money to look after their children, and then just falling into whatever the regular society is. So if society treats Black people a certain way, I think we'll just do it just out of, I think, like I said, it's in the air, it's in the water. It's not like people are like, I just want to be mean. But there's some people who recognize it and they see what's going on around them. And they're like, you know what, I'm a Muslim. I need to be better than this. You know, and I would like for more of us as Muslims to recognize that. And I would say, and I won't say it's just Pakistan and Arabs. You know, my ethnicity is my background is I'm Nigerian. And I find you find it in the West African community too, and other African communities, where there's a disconnect between people who have migrated here recently, people who came through, you know, enslavement, you know, and through the European American transatlantic slave trade. So you're going to have a different way of seeing things. But what I want to see from Muslims generally, regardless of their color, is to be who the Prophet ﷺ encouraged us to be that, you know, and to care. And it doesn't mean you've got to go to every protest, you've got to write about everything, you've got to read about everything. No, but at least be aware that you actually can hold biases. How do I treat people? Do I treat the Black boy, the Black Muslim boy who comes to my masjid, who's a teenager, the same way as I treat the Pakistani ones? Ask yourself those questions. If you're not doing it, just change. You don't have to beat yourself up about it. You don't have to say, oh, I'm a bad person. No, it's okay. People make mistakes. But once you're aware of it, just try and do better. That's really what we want from the community, is for each person to try to live. Like you think about the letter that Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz wrote from when he went for Hajj. And sometimes people use it as a way of saying, oh, Islam is so amazing and we've healed the race problem. How I see it is Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz saw the potential of the Muslims he saw our potential, that we could be those kind of people if we tried. And it's so the challenge is, can we be the kind of people that he speaks about in that letters, whose whiteness didn't impact the way that they treated him, didn't mean that they were full of white supremacy, because a person can have a certain color but not believe in white supremacy, and the person can be Black, like, because people have this excuse of, well, they're Black police officers who have done it too. It's not really about that. It's really about understanding the world a certain way, and that way of understanding the world might even be a way that makes you even look down on people who look like you. It happens, you know. So what we're asking for the Muslim community, inshallah, is to really live up to what the Prophet ﷺ taught us, and what we're given in the Quran, and we can do it, inshallah. Bismillah.
Inshallah. One more question. We have a lot of questions, mashallah, today. And it's, which political party has the better record for listening to and helping the Black American people?
Oh gosh. Oh, there's an amazing quote by Hajj Mike Shabazz. I wish I had it word for word. But his thing is that they're basically saying except that one group will say it to your face that we don't like, we don't care about you, we think you're XYZ, where the other group will smile with you as they do it. But you know what? But I don't want to be totally like a pessimist here. I would say look in your local community, because where you can make a change is understanding who are your local candidates. What are they fighting for? Are they fighting to, like, for example, one of the reasons why a lot of Black people or Black people go jail is because of the bail system. Are they fighting against the bail system? If a person's being, arrested for stealing, I don't know, something that's worth $50 or something, or $10 or whatever it is, and then they're given a bail of $1,000, how do you expect? I mean, come on. If they're already in need, how do you expect that to be something that they can do? So it's like a system that's really, sometimes it just seems like it's designed that way. Allah knows best. I'm not throwing out accusations, but if you've got a candidate who's like concerned about things like that, whatever party they're on, I would vote for that person, because that person's going to come in, and then when the person comes in, it's not the end of the story. You've got to be following up, sending letters, calling up. What's going on with this bill? Are you taking care of this? Are you, if you're concerned about workers' rights, and a candidate is saying they're concerned about it, you vote them in, but then you have to make them accountable. Because sometimes people get very comfortable. They're like, oh, they're just going to vote for us. It doesn't matter what we do. We can do whatever we want. We can say whatever we want. They're going to vote for us. Or maybe they'll care beforehand, but after we're in, we can just carry on. But if we are accountable, we are calling people up, we are making our voices heard and making them realize that, no, we're not going to just sit back and assume you're going to do it. We're going to make sure that all those things you promised, you're doing them. And if you're not, fine, we're going to get you out, and we're going to get somebody in who's going to do it. And if we keep doing that, things will change. But if we're just like complacent, or say, it's the Democratic Party, they care, Republican Party, they care, I don't. That's my answer, basically. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I don't see any more questions, but if anyone has any, they could definitely submit it. Now is your chance. It's funny. I think Ustaza Mariam Sharif is on as well, so she commented saying neither, none of them are good. So she's on the same
that's
page.
The reality. Yeah, that's the reality.
Yeah. I think that's all for the questions, but Jazakallah khairan for that great session. I mean, I learned so much from you, and we really do have a lot of work to do. If this session has taught me and everyone anything, it's that we really have to look inward, and there's just so much we have to do within our own selves and the local level. I mean, there's so many atrocities. So thank you. Please, everyone, make sure you tune in next week. It is our last session. We have a panel of wonderful speakers, inshallah. And if anyone didn't get a chance to ask questions, you can always ask again for next week, which will be our last session, inshallah. And it'll be 8:15 again. We'll be signing off because I know a lot of people have to pray Isha, but Ustaza, if you could just end with dua, that would be great.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli alayhi wa sallam. Ya Allah, please continue to guide us, protect us, show us, and assist us with becoming the people that we need to be, who really uphold justice, who follow the prophetic path when it comes to caring about people, not just about ourselves, really caring about society as a whole, about the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, which is creation as a whole, and really upholding that. May Allah Ta'ala continue to bless this initiative and all the people who are working hard at it. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, Allahumma salli alayhi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum.